You all can let us know when you're ready. Okay. And thank you again, Reverend Al Sharpton, for always being a good foundation for us to stand on as we fight for justice. This is the first time that we're responding because yesterday we got a flurry of calls about the lieutenant who it had been alleged that he was allowed to resign, Reverend Al, instead of being terminated. And it is, it's kind of important because you're going to hear from Rovon and Rodney on what they believe that lieutenant said to them on the night that Tyree was murdered, because I agree with Rovon, his mother, that he was murdered on the 7th. They say he died on the 10th, but she said he was dead that night on that street, as we all saw in the video. The family of Tyree Nichols and the legal team released the following statement. The Nichols family and their legal team are deeply disturbed that the Memphis police allowed and accepted the retirement of Lieutenant Dwayne Smith in light of his immediately pending disciplinary hearing for his decisions and behavior related to Tyree Nichols' death. We believe that Lieutenant Smith was the highest ranking officer at the scene after the brutal beating, and we've seen that Smith observed Tyree's dire medical condition and did not render or direct immediate medical attention. Further, police reports indicate Smith failed to fully assess the scene or examine the facts behind the officer's narrative, which was false. Tyree's parents believe Smith was one of the first officers who came to their home and told them about Tyree's beating, said Tyree was involved in a DUI or on drugs, and did not tell them about the severity of the situation or allow them to see their son. In fact, Tyree's mother, as she will tell you in her own words in just a moment, asked if she could see her son in the hospital. And Lieutenant Smith, they believe that was Lieutenant Smith who came to their house, told her no. Think about that. They said, can we go see him at the hospital? And the police officers told her no. She could not go see her dying son. We call for the Memphis police and officials to do everything in their power to hold Lieutenant Smith and every other individual who was involved fully accountable, and not let Lieutenant Smith or any of the officers cowardly sidestep the consequences of their actions. Their cowardness in resigning and not facing their own disciplinary board to defend themselves is not an ending around on accountability or reckoning. And so at this time, I will try to answer some of your questions afterwards, but I think it's important that you hear directly from Ms. Rovon Wells and Rodney Wells, the parents of Tyree Nichols, about what transpired that night, because this is why they don't want anybody to be given a pass, because you wanted somebody to acknowledge the humanity in Tyree Nichols. And it seems like, Reverend Al, nor the foot patrol, the beat patrol, all the way up to this lieutenant, nobody wanted to recognize that this was a human being that was dying. And at least, let's be truthful, to be able to try to give his family the dignity and the respect that they deserve versus trying to cover it up. Now, this was a time for your character to show. Ms. Rovon Wells and Rodney Wells will address you. And you can just go through the whole thing.
On January 7th, approximately about 8:45 p.m., we received a knock on the door. Actually, it was a bang on the door. My husband proceeded to answer the door, and they was pronounced saying, Memphis police, banging on the door, Memphis police. My husband answered the door. They asked us if we knew Tyree Nichols. I was coming in to the door, and I said, yes, that's our son. What's going on? They proceeded to tell me that he had been arrested for a DUI. And I was kind of confused because my son don't drink like that. He has an occasional beer every blue moon, but not the way they were describing. And I said, okay, where is he? No, they said, the first thing they said was, is he on any type of medication or drugs, or does he use drugs? And I said, no, why? And they said, well, he had this superhuman strength, and he was just doing all this stuff, and, you know, they couldn't handcuff him because he just had all this superhuman strength. And I'm standing there, and I'm going, this doesn't sound like my son. What are you talking about? So I asked, where was my son? I said, where is he? And they said, nearby. And I said, nearby? What does that mean? He proceeded to tell me that my son was being treated by the EMTs. And I said, treated why? What's going on? And he said that my son had to be tased and pepper sprayed because he was resisting arrest. And again, I'm baffled because this doesn't sound like my son. I asked them, they told me that they were going to take him to the hospital. And I said, okay, well, I'm coming to the hospital too. What hospital are you taking him to? They told me that he was going to St. Francis Hospital, but I couldn't come and see him because he was arrested, and that once he was treated, then he would be transported to the jail. And so I'm sitting here and I'm kind of going crazy because I'm not knowing where my son is and what's going on. This officer proceeded to ask me my full name and birth date, and they left. They sat across the street for a little while. My husband and I, we got in our car because we went to go look for our son. Where is he? Because we knew where he was coming from. We knew the route that he would be taking home. So we proceeded to take that route, and we saw his car on the corner. They had the tape around it and everything, and there were two officers. I asked one of the officers, you know, what's going on? Where's my son? They told me they had taken him to the hospital. The officer then came to me and said, was he on any type of drugs or anything? Or because he had this superhuman strength. Okay, and again, I'm like, where is this coming from? Because my son, that's not him. My husband and I, we came home. We're pacing the floors. We can't sleep. We don't know what's going on with Ty. I get a phone call around 4 o'clock in the morning from the doctor from St. Francis. He said, Mrs. Wells, do you know that your son is in the hospital? I said, yes, sir. I said, I was told he was arrested and that I couldn't come because he was arrested And he said, "Who told you that?" I said, "The police officer." He said, "Do you know that your son had went into cardiac arrest and that his kidneys were failing?" And I said, "What?" And that didn't sound like no pepper spray or tasing to me. And he said, "You need to get up here right away because your son is very sick." So I called my cousin and she came, my husband. We all went to the hospital and we walked in. And my son was laying there incubated and he was dead. They had him on a breathing machine. He wasn't really breathing on his own. And so once I got there was the doctor, there was a lieutenant from the Memphis Police Department and a couple other officers. There was another gentleman there. At the time, I didn't know who he was, but I was eventually told that he was part of the TBI, which is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations. They had relieved all the Memphis police officers because the TBI had taken over the case. So that basically told me that my son was dead, because that's the only time that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations would intervene like that in such a fast way. And after that, I just lost it because I had to see my son like that, and he didn't deserve any of the beatings and anything that he received. He was just a good boy. And he was just trying to live his life and get his life together because he has a 5-year-old son.
And he was trying to get home.
He was just trying to get home.
Yeah.
He was less than 800 feet from my home when they caught him and they murdered and beat him to death. And I didn't watch the video because I didn't need to see the video. I already saw what they did to my son. I don't need to see how they did it. But I heard that he was calling my name. And I wasn't there to protect him. And he was just calling my name. And it was earlier, I had felt this pain in my stomach so bad. And I didn't know what it was until I realized that was my son. It was his last breath. And I felt it. And I felt it.
Jeez.
And before Rodney Wells talks to you, and it is heartbreaking, even though I've heard this story a dozen times, it is heartbreaking just to consider, after we saw that video, the lies that they were telling. Because as you watch that video, Tyre Nichols could not have been more compliant.
That's right.
I mean, he was the only one that was trying to de-escalate the situation. All those officers were escalating the situation. And it's kind of profound, Reverend Al, because you know, I have to give a lot of credit to Kareem Ali and the activists and Mr. Wells and them, because we hadn't seen the video. And remember what the police narrative was. The police narrative that was that he was driving erratic and all of this stuff where they had to pull him over. And then they claimed that he was combative, he was threatening them, and that he was putting their lives in danger. But you look at that video, and none of that is true.
That's right.
None of that is true. Tyre never posed a threat to them. He was always just saying, "What did I do?" And he never got an answer. I believe the truth is going to come out, and it's going to be astonishing, because there was no reason for them to ever stop Tyre Nichols. It was a part of a pattern and practice of this Scorpion unit. and the Memphis Police Department. But I have to give a lot of credit to Kareem and activists before Mr. Wells come, because Rev, you know, before I called you, they have been calling me, and you know, we get all these calls every day for how they kill and mistreat black people all across America. And so I'm listening to the police narrative, and I'm telling Kareem Ali, my investigator, well, let's find out more stuff and everything. But he's like, Attorney Crump, you gotta come. And then he sends me the picture that his mother took of Tyree's face when he was in the hospital. I mean, the contusions and the black eyes, and you're like, my God. And then you see the video of how he got those abrasions and the contusions and those black eyes to his face. And Ms. Ravana, we only tell it because we got to keep making the case so we can make sure they get justice. But you all remember how they were punching him, and Tyree's body was going down, and they kept holding him up to take another blow and another blow and another blow and another blow. I think one of the officers said, because the audio captured it, Reverend Al said, I was hitting him with those haymakers.
He sure said it.
And I mean, and this is, they literally beat him to death. And so whether it's Lieutenant Smith or any officer, nobody should get a pass for not giving Tyree the benefit of professionalism, the benefit of decency, and most of all, the benefit of humanity. They should not get a pass. Nobody should be able to get their pension and all this stuff. You should be terminated for these criminal actions. Rodney, do you have something to add?
Yeah. I'd like to put a little bit of clarity to this. My son was 6'3", 140 pounds.
Yeah.
So you have 5 officers that weighed over 200 pounds each, beating on a man that's 140 pounds, but you feared for your life. You say that my son was doing reckless driving and this is the reason why you pulled him over, with no evidence, no camera footage, no car cams. But the weird thing about it, because I'm a person of common sense, if I'm driving reckless, I'm not going to pull up to a stoplight and put my blinker on and wait for the light to turn turn green. If I'm all this reckless driving.
That's right.
One of the officers also had the audacity to say that my son reached for his gun, which no evidence supported that. They were trying to cover their tails. My son worked with me at FedEx. He was beloved by every person in the facility. We had a balloon release that Friday after his passing. It was over 200 people in the parking lot releasing balloons. My son was the type of person that when he seen you coming into work, he makes sure he got a hug. And all the women liked him because he liked fragrances. He likes to make fragrances. So he always smelled very well. So you should have started tears on their eyes during this balloon release because everybody was touched by my son. So the narrative that the police tried to come with us that he was just pepper sprayed and tased, they didn't say anything about the beatings. We never heard that part. So when we got to the hospital after the doctors called us and told us we should get there immediately and and saw our son on a ventilator and a dialysis machine, it was definitely not what we expected, not from what we was told. So not only was his eyes swole shut, his neck was broke. He had abrasions on his wrist so deep that they seemed like they cut it. His head was the size of a watermelon. And you're going to tell me that he was just pepper sprayed and tased.
My Lord.
So for that lieutenant to be able to retire thinking that he's going to escape the consequences of his actions, we're not going to let that happen. The community is not going to let that happen.
That's right.
So that's a part of what we will be fighting for in the future, this injustice.
Yeah.
You trying to hide behind this shield. That shield don't empower you to go out and commit murder.
That's right. Not at all.
So hopefully, through all of this, we will get justice for Tyree and justice for all the other families that are going through this hardship.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take questions, Attorney Crump.
Can you talk a little bit about the George Floyd Policing Act and trying to get it passed, especially with the Republican House?
Yeah, and I'm glad I have my co-counsel here, Reverend Al, because we've been working on this really since Michael Brown and Ferguson. We thought we were going to get it then, and Rev may have been working on it even before that, because I know Congresswoman Maxine Waters and them after Rodney King in '92 were trying to get federal police reform, but it has been the most elusive political football to get over the goal line that we can remember. It does remind you, as Rev used the historical reference of the Civil Rights Act of '64, but now here we are again with the tragic killing of Tyre Nichols, offering another exhibit to the United States Congress saying, how many more videos, how much more evidence, how many exhibits do we have to give you before you say we must have police reform in America to prevent some of these god-awful killings. I mean, just unnecessary killings. I mean, Breonna Taylor, we showed you that the police lied on the search warrant to kill that angel. We showed you the George Floyd video, Terrence brother, begging, saying 28 times, I can't breathe, while 9 minutes and 29 seconds, a knee on his neck. Gwen Carr, Eric Gardner's mother, the first I Can't Breathe case. I mean, we got video after video after video. How many more do we have to show you? And so the hope is Senator Booker, Congressman Jeffries, Senator Durbin,
Congressman
Horsford, all of them are trying to have congressional hearings and Senate hearings to have Ms. Nichols, Ms. Carr, George Floyd's family members, all those people come and put the exhibits right again before the American public to say, how long, America, how long? And I'll defer to Reverend Sharpton.
I also just want to add that the George Floyd Act did become an executive order with the president, where the family and all of us were present. But an executive order only covers federal employees while that president is in office. That's why we need the law. And I will never forget at the funeral of Tyre Nichols that when his mother spoke over the casket of her son, she asked for people to please pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And the pain that she and Rodney go through but to stand up even beyond their pain and speak for justice for others is admirable. Any other questions?
Secondly, President Trump recently, a little off topic, President Trump said that he will be arrested on Tuesday by the Manhattan DA. He's calling for protests. What is your response to that? What are your thoughts?
Well, all I can say is that if he is arrested Tuesday, he will be in my prayers, but I will not be protesting for him. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent job.
Let's bring up the new members and we're ready to go.
He been acting like he oddly influential today. Yeah.
Now, I'm glad.